Wonderful. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the Mount Prospect-Waukegan Migration Go Live Review and Offline Demo. Um, my name is Mieko. I am the Member Services Librarian for Public Services here at CCS, and I will be taking you through today's webinar. So this webinar is being recorded. A link to the recording will be shared directly with everyone who registered and will also be posted in CCS News. So here is an overview of what we're going to be going over today. So in this session, we'll be reviewing the Go Live schedule. We will be doing a brief demo of Polaris Remote Offline Circulation. And then we're going to wrap up with a few tasks that your library can do to help you prepare for our go live in a few weeks. Deborah is monitoring chat for me during the webinar. So if you add a question to chat, we will hold it until we're at a good spot to pause, and then we'll address whatever pending questions we have. So let's start with reviewing the go live schedule. So this is the timeline of events during our offline leading up to go live. For go live, we're mostly looking at a date range of September 26th through October 1st. Our go live events are going to kick off on September 26th. So Innovative will pull Mount Prospect's data after they close on the 25th. So starting on the 26th, Mount Prospect staff will begin using Polaris Remote Offline Circulation. On this day, Waukegan will remain online in Sierra, and all other CCS libraries will be online in Polaris. Innovative will extract Waukegan's data overnight. So the next day, on Friday, September 27th, Waukegan will start using Polaris Remote Offline. Mount Prospect staff will continue to work in Polaris Offline, and all other CCS staff libraries will continue to be online for that day and work in production Polaris. Innovative will also make a copy of our production database to training. So this data sync will complete before libraries open, and this will allow the database to be as up to date as possible for the offline period. Um, After libraries close on September 27th, you should disable your sorters. So your sorters cannot do any check-ins. Also at close, libraries should either disable their self-check machines or move them into offline mode. If using self-checks in offline mode, libraries are required to test offline circ in preparation for the offline period. So if needed, check with your vendor to see if that feature is available and how the offline transaction files will be stored and uploaded. Um, Also happening this evening, CCS will disable telephony so patrons cannot call in and attempt to renew items. And also e-commerce options in the pack will be disabled so patrons will not see the option to make any kind of payments. Now, as with previous migrations, Innovative will perform a SIP and Power Pack redirect. So this means that SIP services will be authenticating against our training database. And this allows Training Leap, again, to be accessible to existing CCS library staff throughout the offline period. So staff will be able to use Training Leap as a reference tool to look up patron accounts and search for materials. Now, this only applies to current CCS libraries. We won't have Mount Prospect and Waukegan data in our training database at this time because we've already done a resync. So your libraries, I know, are talking internally about some alternate options. And then Innovative will also redirect our production Power Pack over to training Power Pack during offline. So users who go to the Power Pack will automatically be redirected to the system level training pack. Here are some screenshots from last year's migration, just so you kind of know what to expect to see. And this will allow patrons um, the ability to search our collection, like grab a call number. And just like previous migrations, some features will not be available, such as like placing holds or renewing items. Um, so all production packs will be directed to our system training pack as kind of like a view only option for staff and patrons. And then all CCS libraries will be using remote offline circulation at the start of the day, September 28th. All libraries will continue to use remote offline circ from September 28th through September 30th. So what's available during offline? Not too many services will be available. During our offline period, libraries are able to check materials out to patrons, including ready for pickup holds and ready for pickup interlibrary loans. Optionally, libraries can also register new patrons, right? Um, this is not required. Your library can decide if you do want to register or if you want to pause that service during offline. Another optional service is hourly non-holdable material check-in, right? So hourly or daily use materials that are not eligible for holds, such as laptops or other in-house equipment, may be checked in. So if your library will do hourly material check-in, just establish a procedure internally for how you want to handle that. Again, we'll have those training Power Pack search functions, and we will also have training Leap and the client available for search functions. So again, we will not have any transactions happening on the Power Pack or on training Leap. It's going to be just view only access. And then again, we will have our SIP authenticating against our training. So services such as Overdrive patrons will be able to log in and authenticate services that authenticate against SIP like Overdrive. And again, at this time, Mount Prospect and Waukegan data will have been removed from the training database. So this point is relevant for existing CCS libraries. We will have many more unavailable services at this time. So libraries should not be checking in kind of your general material, and this includes anything that's coming in through delivery. In offline circulation, there's no way for the system to determine if material should be like transit to another library or if it should be on hold to another user or otherwise requires action. So materials should be set aside until the morning of go live, and this includes Rails delivery. Libraries will also not be able to run the pick list or process holds at this time. You will not be able to modify patron records. So this includes things like paying fees, removing blocks, or renewing cards. So again, one thing your library can talk about internally is how you want to handle patrons who say cards are expired. Libraries will not be able to create interlibrary loan or on-the-fly records. And all technical services functions will be unavailable at this time. During offline, API services will be disabled. So we are able to do a SIP redirect to training. We are not able to provide that same service for API. So this is a list of vendors who at one point requested a Polaris API information. So we can anticipate that they may use API to authenticate patrons and maybe down during offline. And this includes services such as Access 360, Cloud Library, Hoopla, and Canopy. Now, a number of these services offer both API and SIP authentication, and CCS doesn't know which protocol your library is using. So if you need to verify, confirm with your vendor about access during the offline period. And I also want to specifically point out here that Find More Illinois is also on this list. Find More will not be able to communicate with Polaris during our offline period. So during offline, libraries should not perform any actions in Share It. QCS will be available during the offline period. So if you have an urgent issue that needs to be resolved immediately, call the main CCS line so we can resolve it as soon as possible. Urgent issues are ones that prevent staff from doing their job, right? So, for example, if you can't check out items to patrons during offline, that's an urgent issue. Call us directly so we can get started on fixing it immediately. For non urgent issues, you can email help@ccslib.org and we will respond as soon as possible during our regular business hours. So, Innovative will complete processing our database the afternoon of Monday, September 30th. Once complete, CCS and Innovative will do quality assurance testing to make sure that everything looks good. CCS will load our remote offline files, and then the pack and SIP redirect to training will be removed. So this is scheduled for 10:30 p.m. on Monday. So after 10:30 p.m. on Monday, our SIP services will be authenticating against production once again. And then starting on Tuesday, October 1st, Mount Prospect and Waukegan will both be online and live with Polaris. All CCS libraries will begin that day using production Polaris. Um, so at the start of the day, your libraries can turn on your sorters. If your library used self-checks in offline mode, you'll need to load those offline files according to your vendor's instructions. And libraries should load those offline self-check offline files by noon. And then looking after October 1st. So work doesn't stop on October 1st. So CCS anticipates web reports coming online on Tuesday, October 1st with the rest of CCS services. However, reports will not have run during the offline period, and there's going to be a processing backlog. So we anticipate that all reports will be available by Friday, October 4th at the end of the day. Daily reports will be processed and become available first, followed by monthly reports. Additionally, CCS staff will be working on patron and bib deduplication. For both of these record types, we have an automation that we are working on that's going to catch as many records as possible. But we will also have to manually review and manually deduplicate both types of records. So thinking about CircStaff specifically, in terms of patron records, during this time, you may encounter a user that has like a home library record at Mount Prospect or Waukegan and a reciprocal record in the CCS database. If you encounter a patron like this, use their home library account, um, and we will eventually be able to merge these users together. So this is a great point where I'm going to pause before we move into the offline review. So I want to see, Deborah, what questions have come through.
There are currently no questions in the chat, Mieko, so maybe we're saving them up, or we might see a couple pop in the next couple of minutes. But as of now, oop, We've got one. Lori asks, should we merge patrons ourselves?
If libraries feel comfortable, they can merge patrons themselves. Um, if you do not feel comfortable, it is 100% okay to leave it for CCS to take care of.
We have another question from Carrie, who asks, is there a benefit of pausing Rails delivery? And is that really just space availability?
Since I do not work in a space that gets Rails delivery, I would love to hear from other libraries that have gone through migrations in years past to see if they have any insight about letting the Rails delivery come and just kind of accumulate, or if it's better to pause. So feel free to like throw something in chat or unmute yourself and share a comment.
All right, and that is it for questions, Mieko. We've got some libraries chiming in on whether they pause and take delivery. So Carrie, hopefully that gives you some guidance as we're getting closer to offline.
I will also say, because I bet there's some really good input in chat right now about delivery, we will also share the chat log along with the recording to everyone who registered. Well, keep thinking. If you do think of any other questions, go ahead and throw them into the chat.
All right,
At
we've
this
got
time,
one more,
oh,
Mieko. I'm
yeah,
gonna,
great.
just before we move on to the next section, Kathy asks for bid record merging. Will Waukegan and Mount Prospect's records be merged into CCS records, or will the best record be selected? And then a follow-up question to that is, will existing preliminary data records be merged to Waukegan and Mount Prospect records?
That is a really good question. I may have to check in with our technical services staff here and follow up with an answer um, in the session follow-up email. I'm just going to make a note to
Answer now
myself here.
if you want me to.
Oh yeah, Rachel, thanks. That'd be great.
So there's a two-step process when the data is loaded that Innovative uses. First, they match the Waukegan and the Mount Prospect records and deduplicate those together. Then they deduplicate them against the CCS records. So they always choose the CCS record when one exists. They don't have the ability to choose the best record if a Mount Prospect or Waukegan record would be better.
Thank you. So glad you were here, Rachel.
All right, and that wraps up our questions so far, Mieko.
Wonderful. Okay, well, let's move into the offline circulation part of the webinar. So if you work in circulation, you have likely heard us talk about two different types of offline modes. There is local offline, where the client is downloaded directly onto your computer, and it's used when we cannot access the Polaris remote servers. So this is typically used when libraries lose internet connection. Remote offline, however, it's used when we can still access our remote servers. We just can't access our own database, like in the case of a library migration. So for the migration offline period, we will be using remote offline. So again, this is because we can access the Polaris remote servers. We're just not able to access our own database. With remote offline, the transactions are stored on the Polaris remote servers. And this means that CCS can access the files. So we will upload the transaction files on behalf of libraries. Each transaction file will generate a transaction log where it will give information about the checkouts including those that could be not completed due to things like an incorrect patron barcode or an incorrect item barcode. Libraries are not required and honestly do not need to review these offline logs. If you do, we have instructions on our remote offline how to webpage about how you can access the logs if your library does want to review. So I'm going to move into the demo part. While I'm like transitioning to my desktop, I'll see if there's any other questions that came through.
No new questions, Mieko, though Rachel answered in the chat Kathy's questions about whether PDRs or preliminary data records will match. And the answer is yes. As long as they match using Innovative's criteria, they'll be able to deduplicate those PDRs.
That's excellent. And for some reason, looks like I paused. So let me reshare my desktop here. Good. I cleaned up my desktop for everyone. So hopefully this is not as visually busy as it normally is. So we're going to walk through how to log on to Polaris Remote offline, how to check out items, how to register a patron, and then how to log off. So since we are using remote offline, I will be using our regular standard production staff client. Depending on your computer setup, you may need to enter credentials to connect to the terminal server like I do, or your library may be set up to automatically do this step. So I'm going to enter in my credentials to connect to the terminal server. If you are asked to enter the credentials and you're not sure what to use, consult with your IT department if you have any questions about what username or password you should use here. And it'll take me a moment to connect. Okay. So once you're connected, you will be prompted to log in to the staff client. So one thing we want to note here is kind of like our visual cues that we are working in the production client. So I just want to make sure that I've got, my blue banner here that tells me I am in the production client and not our training client. To work in offline mode, you will select this little button to work offline. So this is what shifts us into that remote offline mode. And the nice thing here, since we are working in offline, we only need to enter our Polaris username. We don't need to enter our password. So I'm just going to remove the terminal server name, which was automatically input. I'm going to enter in my own Polaris username. And then I'll click OK to complete logging in. It will take me a second here to log in. Since we are working in offline, many staff client actions are going to be inaccessible. So you see all the usual technical services functions are all grayed out here. I'm not able to do things like create or edit item records. Looking under the circulation menu, we do see that both check out and check in are accessible. So again, very important note, aside from hourly use materials, we do not want to check in during offline. Check-in triggers that lot of secondary actions like setting materials in transit, playing holds. So you do need to wait until we're back online to check in materials so you are able to act on those secondary transactions. So our remote offline functions, again, are limited to checking out and patron registration. So I'm going to start with checking out. To check out, I'm going to go to circulation and then the checkout option. And since I just logged on, I first want to make sure I'm set up to print checkout receipts. So to check on this, I'm going to open my Tools menu and go to Options. And in the options, I want to make sure that the checkbox next to the checkout receipt option is active and that my style is set to receipt. And then you'll verify that the printer and driver options appropriate for your library are set here. I'm going to keep my settings as is. Yours may look different depending on your library's printer and driver. I'll click OK to confirm the options. So before I move into actually demoing a checkout, I'm going to pause, see if there's any questions.
No new questions in the chat, Miko.
Excellent. So I've got a demo patron here that I'm going to use today. Now that our receipt options are set, we're ready to start checking out to patrons. So when a patron comes up and they're ready to check out, I'm just going to scan their barcode into the patron barcode field. I would just double check that the barcode scanned correctly. Polaris offline will not be able to identify invalid patron barcodes. If there is a record of the patron in our offline files, the patron's name and library should populate these fields. If not, there is no need to worry. The checkouts will still be applied when the transaction files are uploaded. As you'll see here with this user, there are some conditions that may prompt a block alert to appear. So this includes if the patron has a library assigned block, a free text block, or a system block. And these are things like the PAC self-registration and card expiration blocks, or also a collection agency block. Other conditions will not prompt a block. So offline circulation will not alert staff if the user has a long overdue item, or if they owe money, or if they have notes. At the end of the demo, I'm going to show you where you can find a list of conditions on our website that will tell you like what alerts pop up to staff and which do not. So for this user, I'm going to say, yes, I do want to continue checking out to them. And then to check out, we will scan the item barcode in this item barcode field. So I'm just going to type one in here and press enter. So the item is going to check out with your library's default loan period. Right now, I'm logged into the CCS branch. My default loan period is set for, that's 4 weeks. So if you're testing and you notice that your library's default loan period is not set to what you want, email help@ccslib.org and we can adjust that default loan period for you. If you are checking out and you need to give something, assign a loan period that's not your default, you are able to set a special loan before you scan the item. So before I scan my next item, I'm going to click this special button. And this way I can set a custom due date. So I am able to either select a date from the calendar, or I can use this loan period field to specify a value. So I'm going to say, I'll say 14 days here. And then you can indicate if you want that special loan to apply to the next item only, right? So after the next item is checked out, that loan period is going to reset back to the default. You can say apply to all items for this patron. So after for everything else I scan for this patron, it'll apply that special loan date. After I complete the transaction with this user, that loan period is going to go back to the default for the next patron. Or I can say apply to all checkouts moving forward. And this adjusted loan period will be applied until I either reset it or until I log out. So for this demo's sake, I'm going to choose apply just to the next item only, and then I will say okay to finish applying. So now I see a special loan period displayed here. So this is my visual that special loan is active. So now when I check out my next item, 9, it is going to give that special date. Since I chose the option to apply just to the next item only, I'll see that value no longer displays here. So that loan period automatically reset. It's now back to the default. I'm going to go back into special because I just want to show you how to reset the special loan if you need. So I'm going to go in, I'm going to choose the option to apply to all items for this patron and say okay. Again, I've got that visual that my special loan is active. So I'm going to check out one more item to my user with that special loan value. But this time, again, because I said like apply to all checkouts to this patron, my special loan is still active. If I need to go back to the default, all I need to do is click the reset button and the due date will reset back to the default loan period. So I'm going to click reset. My special loan no longer shows there. And now if I check out one more item, it will check out for my default loan period. When you are finished checking out to the patron, we now need to close out of the record and print a checkout receipt. So to close the record and generate that receipt, we will put our cursor in the empty item barcode field and then hit enter on your keyboard. So this is going to close that patron, it's going to print that checkout receipt, and it's going to reset checkout for the next user. So that is checking out in remote offline mode. So I am next going to demo patron registration. I'll do a pause and see if there's any questions that came through.
We do have one question in the chat. The question is, do we need to check the checkout receipt setting every time we log in, as in every 2 to 3 hours? Or once selected, would it ever change back to unselected?
To be safe, check those receipt printer options whenever you do a login. Any other questions?
That was the only one so far.
So let's look at patron registration. Again, registration is optional. If the library decides they will register patrons during offline, you do want to designate one circulation workstation for patron registration. In order to avoid load errors, we need to make sure that any transaction files that include patron registrations are loaded first before any of the just like checkout registration files. So this is why you need to designate one workstation for registration. Libraries had until September 13th to decide if they were doing patron registration. So you still have until the end of the day tomorrow to decide if you will be registering patrons during offline. If you do decide to register patrons and you have not yet done so, please email help@ccslib.org. Send us the workstation name so that way we know which files to load first. To register a patron, you will find this option under the Patron Services menu and Patron Records. And this opens a new patron registration work form. The work form, it does look very different from the LEAP patron registration work form. but it contains all of the same fields. So the registration work form, it's split into a couple different tabs. And you can navigate back and forth to the different tabs using these icons on the left-hand side of the work form. So I'm just kind of clicking through here. So again, it's all of the same information that you'll use in the LEAP work form. I will very quickly take us through filling one out. Up top here, you have a field for the patron's barcode and their name fields. So I'm just going to enter in a test barcode here. We'll go 1, 2, 3. I'll say this is my demo patron. And then check that the registered at branch and the patron code and the expiration date are set appropriately. So the defaults here are going to appear differently based on what your library's defaults are. So just double check that they are appropriate to the patron. When it comes time to input the patron's address, you will click, right? So here's like the field where their address information displays. And to add a new address right below that field, you will see this little add button. If I click that, it will open a dialog box where I can input the address information. So I'm just going to input some information real quick. Oops. National and Lincolnshire, Illinois, and I will say okay. So again, if you find you made a little mistake there and you want to edit, you can just highlight that address information and click the edit button or click the remove button if you want to remove it altogether. And then also, again, this should recognize your library's defaults, but I would just glance at this address check date to make sure it is appropriately set. At the bottom of this first tab, we have our contact and notice information, right? So this is where we indicate like what their notification option will be, input their email address and their phone number. So you will just enter that information as you normally do in LEAP. So that's this first tab. The second tab, if I hover over it, you'll see it's labeled the General tab. So in this tab, at the minimum, you will fill out the statistical class field, enter their birth date, and then enter their ILL-RB library code. If you forget one of these fields, Polaris will still register the user, and then staff will be able to input the missing fields when they're next reviewing or editing the account. So let me just enter in some data here. Birth date, it's okay. It will say I'm born today, and then my ILL-RB library code. I'm just going to click a random one in there. So when I have this info filled out and I'm ready to save, I will click the save icon in the upper left corner. You'll get confirmation that the patron's record was saved. And when I say okay, it's going to reset the patron registration work form for the next new patron. Any user that is registered in offline will automatically have a verify user offline block placed on their card. CCS will build a report of patrons registered during offline in Simply Reports and send to the libraries who are doing registration, just so you can review the record and LEAP, check to see if there were any required fields that were missed, and then remove that block. Let's see, are there any questions about patron registration?
We've got one question from Karen in the chat, and it is, how will the notification option text be entered and carrier information?
Um, I had to remind myself of how this works. Okay, so if you are going to, if your patron is choosing to use text messages, um, when you enter in the number, just enter in something here. Let me do one more just for demo's sake. Um, if they are receiving text messages, you'll want to select the little checkbox next to, under this TXT field, next to the number that will get text messages, and then select their carrier from the list.
Thanks, Mieko. And that was the last question in the chat. So carry on.
Excellent. Okay. So wrapping up with the demo, the last thing I'm going to demo is logging out of remote offline. When you're using remote offline, it's important to log out, say, every 2 to 3 hours. When you log out, this completes a transaction file. And logging out at these regular intervals helps us create smaller transaction files. And this also helps us from like losing a file with like a whole day's worth of checkouts if something does happen or if the file is corrupt. So uh, the best thing to do is to log out every 2 to 3 hours. To log out, you will go to File and then Log Off. Click OK to confirm. And at this point, a transaction file is completed. So then during the day, you'll go back to File and log on, and you'll repeat that login process. You'll select the Work Offline checkbox and enter in your Polaris username and click OK, and you are back on. So now I am primed. I am starting to record a new transaction file there. At the end of the day, when you are ready to close down, you can go to File and Exit, and this will simultaneously log you off and close up the client. And then if it's the end of the day and I am completely logging off, I will also use this log off the Polaris server. This closes my connection to the remote server. Before I completely log off, I saw a chat come through. If we have another question, I can log back into the remote offline.
We do have another question, but you don't have to log back in. Karen has another great question, and she asks, will offline ever be web-based?
Love that question. They are, I know they are working on a web-based offline. The hiccup with that right now is that it relies on cookies. So if cookies are cleared, we lose all of the transaction files. So it's a work in progress and not quite something that we are ready to adopt yet. Okay, so again, when CCS is going to be uploading the offline transaction files, for every transaction file that is uploaded, Polaris will create a log. These logs are going to tell you how many transactions were completed and if there were any warnings or errors. So warnings are conditions that do not prevent checkout. So it's things like alerting you that the user owed money. Errors indicate that the item did not check out. And most commonly, you'll see this because the patron barcode scanned incorrectly or the item barcode scanned incorrectly. So we have instructions on our website if libraries would like to view those transaction logs. So I told you I would show you where that was. I'm going to open up my browser here, and I'm going to head to our website, to ccslib.org. And there's actually a few things I want to show you here. So the first is where to find information about remote offline. And the easiest way to get to that is opening up this how-to section and going to public services area. It's taking a moment to load here. Loves creating drama. There we go. So in the Department of Public Services section, if you scroll down, you will see a whole subsection on offline. And one of the pages is on using remote offline. So here you will find all of the step-by-step that we reviewed during the demo. And you will also find information on how to view offline transaction logs. We click on that to jump down to that section. So this will show you step by step how to access those logs. Again, libraries are not required to check your logs. The other area, I don't know, I just scrolled right all the way up. The other area I wanted to show you is the migration page. So this has all of the info about offline. It has our schedule. It has all the like FAQ things that have come up. And you will find this page under the Member Tools menu, and the page is called Mount Prospect-Waukegan Migration. You have very likely seen links and references to this page in CCS News. If you haven't yet, I absolutely encourage you to check it out. Again, we have all the information on our offline and our go live period here. So let me open up my slides again to finish this up. So I want to round out our webinar today by looking at some tasks that your library can do to prepare for offline. So the first thing is, again, most libraries have already made this decision. If you haven't, you still have a day to decide if you want to register patrons during offline. If you do, email help@ccslib.org with that workstation name by end of day tomorrow. Um, If you haven't yet, make sure you install that Polaris remote desktop connection on computers that are going to use offline circulation so staff can access the staff client. We also are asking that libraries review and test remote offline procedures by end of day Thursday, September 19th. So this includes testing remote offline at your circulation stations. And if you are using self-checks in offline mode, testing those as well with vendor assistance as needed. And this is just to make sure that you are able to access remote offline without running into any error messages and that your library will be ready for the following week. Included in that test is just making sure that your computers are able to print receipts in Polaris offline. Make sure anyone who is working and will be doing offline circulation leading up to go live, that they know where to find instructions for how to use remote offline that they can reference if they need. I believe most libraries already have this covered, but I will also make a mention. Confirm anyone who is working during the offline period is subscribed to CCS News. We will be sending regular updates about where we are at in the migration process and what is coming next. We will send alerts confirming when our SIP connection is back on production and confirming when libraries are able to come online. We will send all of that through CCS News. So it's very important that anyone who is working is subscribed to receive those issues and is watching out for them. And then finally, do contact Rails Delivery if your library would like to pause delivery services offline. It sounds like Rails is not only open to pausing dropping off items, but also pausing taking items. So they may ask some more follow-up questions for you to kind of get your services all set. Um, and then finally, I've got some links here to the resources that we mentioned during this webinar. So we showed you where to find that Mount Prospect-Waukegan migration page on our website, the using remote offline page on our website. And then finally, we have our information for our help desk. So if anything does come up leading up to go live, if you find you do have questions, please do not hesitate to reach out to our help desk and ask your questions there. So that brings me to the end of the presentation and the demo. I will take whatever time we have left for additional questions.
There are currently no new questions in the chat, Mieko, but Kiara did pop in the links to the migration page on the website and the using remote offline page as well. So those are right there in the chat if anyone wants to check those pages out.
Perfect. Thanks, Kiara. Cool. So think of what questions you have. I'm happy to stick around as long as you need. Leading up to that, I will just kind of do some housekeeping stuff at the end. So I will share, again, the recording, the chat log, and the slides to everyone who registered today. We will also post links to the recording in CCS News. The follow-up email will also include a link to a training evaluation form and also an attendance form. So we know there are a lot of people watching at a shared computer or in a group, and we would really like to get accurate attendance numbers. So if you are watching live, please fill out the attendance form by next Thursday, September 19th. If you were if you were the one who registered for this session, like on behalf of a group, please forward that email to everyone who was watching so they can fill out the form and show that they were attending live. So I should have the recording and everything ready to go by tomorrow morning. So do watch your inboxes for that information. So I will say thank you to everyone, not only for attending today, but for all of your help and diligence leading up to this process. A huge shout out to the Waukegan and Mount Prospect staff on this call. Everyone has been working so hard. I am really excited to get to, that offline period. We've been preparing so much for it. I'm like, it's here. I'm ready. So yeah, can't wait to have you guys on board. So with that, I am going to stop the recording. Again, I'm happy to stay on for any other questions that we have.